Good afternoon, everyone. These microphones are very sensitive. Pleased to welcome you to everyone to the meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee taking place here in the Walton Room, the Winchester Guildhall. The time is now 1 o'clock, irrespective of what the clock says on the wall. My name is Mike Reed, Councillor Mike Reed. I'm one of the members of this particular Licensing Subcommittee. The opening part of this meeting will begin with being streamed live and recorded on the Council's YouTube channel. Subtitles are available and advice on how to tune into this is set out in our website. Can everyone please ensure that their mobile phones are switched off or at least running on silent? In the unlikely event that it is necessary to evacuate the building, you'll follow the fire marshal and he will direct us to Abbey Park, and at Abbey Park we'll do a quick muster to make sure everybody is in one place. Thank you. The hearing regulation requires that the hearing should be taken in the form of a discussion led by the subcommittee, and that cross-examination will not normally be allowed. We will be following the adopted practice or procedure for this hearing, which is set out on the reverse of the agenda papers. Each party will be allowed equal time, maximum time, to exercise their right to the hearing. I will exercise my discretion to allow additional time if necessary, taking into account the requirement to allow all parties equal maximum time. Only these points contained in this written representation of the report and the supplementary documents can be raised. No new evidence can be considered except with the agreement of all parties. Can I now introduce my colleagues on the table?
Councillor Vivian Atchell.
Councillor Brian Nomi.
Thank you very much. I will ask, in a minute, I will ask the officers to make their presentation, but before we do that, I would like people to introduce themselves.
Nathan Mountney, solicitor.
Claire Humphreys, licensing officer.
Carol Stephenchuk, licensing manager.
Thank you. And
Nancy Graham,
Also-
democratic services officer.
Nancy, you're off to the side, so I didn't mean to forget you, honestly. Could I now ask the representatives around the table, starting with...
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lana Tricker. I'm from LT Law, representing the applicant today.
Good afternoon, I'm Robin McMillan. I'm the Chief Executive of Exton Park.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Kit Ellen, Commercial Director at Exton Park.
Thank you very much. And now on the bottom table, if I may.
I'm Roy Middleton, speaking for the applicant.
Kevin Robertson, also speaking on behalf of the applicant.
David Faircook, speaking on behalf of numerous objectors and myself.
And Amanda Berwick, would you like to come and join the table? It'll save you moving around to struggle in.
So Amanda Berwick, also one of the objectors.
Yeah, and I understand that most of you are speaking on behalf of other representatives who are present, presumably sat behind you. Thank you. Could I ask you then, when you have made your presentation and you've answered questions, to leave the table and retire to the public gallery, if you would be so kind. So, are there any disclosure of interest, Councillor Ashford?
No, sure.
Councillor Amy?
No.
And I also have none. Thank you. Right. The subcommittee has all read the written comments on the application, which are included in the report. I understand that the following persons, and you've just introduced yourself, are present. We can only consider issues related to the full licensing objectives at this meeting. We'll now, that is the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance, and protection for children or of children. The subcommittee will also have regards to the national guidelines and national guidance and the council's licensing policy, which we have both copies table just in case there's a problem. I will now call upon the licensing manager or officer to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. This report relates to an application for a new premises licence submitted by Exton Park Vineyard LLP under Section 17 of the Licensing Act 2003 for the premises known as Exton Park. The applicant seeks to provide the supply of alcohol as detailed on page 6 of the report. The full application can be seen as Appendix 1 to the report, pages 19 to 37. 44 representations were received from other persons, 18 of which are against the application and 26 in support of the application. The representations are set out in Appendix 2 to this report and relate to all 4 of the licensing objectives: the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. Some representations against the application relate to how the grant of the premises licence could increase traffic on narrow country roads and put public safety at risk. The subcommittee must consider if the grant of the licence would undermine any of the licensing objectives. Several representations against the application relate to how the grant of the premises licence is in breach of planning permission granted to Exton Park. Page 118 of the revised guidance issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003 states that planning and licensing regimes involve consideration of different, albeit related, matters. Licensing committees are not bound by decisions made by a planning committee and vice versa. Exton Park and its surrounding land is within the South Downs National Park. The South Downs National Park Authority, as the planning authority, were consulted on the application but did not submit a formal representation, but did comment that members must have regard to the duty and the purposes of the park when considering this application, as detailed in page 10 of the report. The South Downs National Park Authority acknowledged that the planning and licensing regimes are separate. Whilst licensing is defined legislation, planning has a broader consideration, and therefore the two regimes may not come to the same conclusions. In their application for Exton Park have applied for the sale of alcohol for consumption on and off the premises. Therefore, under the Deregulation Act 2015, if a premises has a licence for on sales between the hours of 0800 hours and 2300 hours, they do not require a licence for live or recorded amplified music, provided there are no more than 500 people in attendance. Should the subcommittee decide to grant the licence, Exton Park would benefit under the Deregulation Act 2015. If the subcommittee were minded to grant this licence, there are possible conditions offered by the applicant as set out in the operating schedule and also set out in section 5 of the report to consider. The subcommittee may reword these as they feel appropriate in order to promote the licensing objectives. There are several parties present at the hearing who wish to address the subcommittee today. Members are reminded that individuals may only refer to comments that they made in their written representation. Finally, I refer to Appendix 2, page 98 of the report. A representation was received in support of the application from Dougal Christie. The address should have read West Meon and not Exton. Therefore, please note, this individual actually resides approximately 5.8 kilometres away from Exton and not in Exton itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Councillor Lane? Sorry. Thank you. We'll now turn to the applicant. Would you like to present your case, please?
Thank you very much. So as we've heard, I act for Exton Park Vineyard LLP. We've had introductions, but Robin, the Chief Executive, he has over 30 years experience in the wine industry. So we have a very experienced head at Exton Park. Kit Allen is also the commercial director, and he's been at Exton for 6.5 years. I've prepared a submission statement which is in the papers, and that's at page 43, and I know that you will have read that. So I'll try and speed things along. By way of explanation, Exton Park Vineyard is a 60-acre private estate. It's a single vineyard, and it's offering award-winning English sparkling wines. It has its own winery, site storage, and the hall, which consists of a series of rooms. And it's this building that we're seeking a premises licence for today, and the plans of that are at page 39 of the report. Exton Park was originally planted in 2003, and it's been trading to the public since 2015, I'm told, when the wine was first released. So this is an application for a new premises licence for the hall, although, as you've read in the papers, the premises an existing premises licence for off sales already. So this application is made to assist the business, put in enforceable operating conditions, and to provide more regulation, which I'll come to shortly. The hours sought are from 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. 7 days. They're modest hours, and it should give members hopefully an indication of the style of event that we're seeking and why we want their licence. We're not seeking early hours entertainment or music or alcohol consumption. As the papers show, the application's attracted a lot of attention, both for and against what the application is seeking. And my client has read and taken on board all the comments that have been received. There's been 29 positive supporting and 19 negative, and this takes into account the additional not representations, but support letters and the additional objection as well, which came in late. The comments come mostly from the village, which is helpful to everyone. My client sought to involve the local community, and prior to lodging the application in January, held a residents' meeting, a community meeting, whereby more than 60 people attended. That was from the local area, not just Exton, that attended, and a tour was given. Robin and Kit were both there, and plans of the vineyard were discussed at that meeting. And of course, individual emails also followed following that. I will say, as we've heard, that it's important to determine this application based on the 4 licensing objectives and planning matters and considerations of need, which is raised in a number of representations, aren't relevant considerations today. Obviously, we do know the community and the sensitivities of the area. We are an important asset, benefit to the community in terms of employment and investment as well. As I said, we've been trading since 2015. We've also held a number of temporary event notices as well for a terminal hour, I think leading up to 10:30, 11 p.m. And this has been, no objections have been received in relation to the trading under the temporary event notices. And this has also been confirmed by the authorities. So it shows that with this trading that we're planning, we have zero impact on the community whilst operating at the premises. Now, I do want to be cautious about using the phrase events in terms of, so I don't give the wrong impression. And as stated in my submission, Exton Park's planning smaller bespoke events scattered across the week, month, year, and the aim is to use the hall as designed. So for small gatherings, rather than a series of large ticketed events or anything like that. We plan to have board strategy meetings, canapes, receptions, but it all must be to promote the wine at the vineyard. The applicant will still have some small ticketed events, such as the winemaker's dinner, but that's only for a small amount for about 20 people. And the focus is certainly as to what the planning permission and the intention of the vineyard is. I know time is sort of limited to deal with this, so I wanted to go to the objection letters, and we fully appreciate the concerns of the residents and the local community, but I emphasise there's no real complaints about the operation of the vineyard itself by those objecting to the application. And we have been trading, as I said, to the public since 2015, planted since 2004. Some of those objections have even been quite complimentary about the vineyard, which we're grateful for. Of course, there's no objections from the police or environmental health noise team. They're very happy with the proposal. They're the experts in crime and disorder and noise and nuisance according to the guidance, and they're content with the hours proposed and the proposed conditions. But as we've heard, what we do see in the representations is a common theme for those objecting as to the transport. And whilst my principal submission is this is a matter for planning, for transparency, and in case members do consider it in terms of the noise and nuisance licensing objective, I just wanted to reiterate a few points. We have the licence for off sales, we're operating now. There will therefore be no additional transport servicing arrangements as a result of the grant of this application. Deliveries and waste will be the same, and they were considered and determined in respect of the planning application. There was 2 planning applications and they were considered in relation to both. Exton Park is also fully planted out, so the wine production is unlikely to increase. So therefore deliveries, exports will not change as a result of the granting of this application. And it also means that no one will be affected by any increase in terms of transport servicing the vineyard should this application be granted. So the issues in relation to transport really relate to the on licence and people attending the vineyard. And in terms of traffic, we don't expect the number of patrons to increase substantially. We're expecting approximately 30 to 40 people per week. And this is very, very low numbers considering other vineyards in the local community. Now, we know this application will be judged on its merits as required, but it's important to put the application in context as to what's actually being permitted now and how that will change. The Exton events will mostly be in groups of around 6, sometimes smaller, sometimes larger, spread predominantly over Monday to Friday and occasionally weekends. And of course, that's the number of people. So the car journeys will be significantly less as people don't travel solo. Given the very low volumes of traffic likely to be generated by its infrequent use by intended visitors, the overall trips generated will be low and easily accommodated by the lanes serving the site. Furthermore, there's no evidence, which members must consider, of adverse traffic safety issues in the area currently, especially as a result of Exton Park. Websites are, however, being amended. We've listened from the January meeting and we are putting further instructions and emphasising access and the locality, and additional traffic signage will be put up where we're able to do so. Obviously, other permissions will be required for that. Management has also made it very clear to service vehicles that no vehicle over 7.5 tonnes should come through the village. And of course, directions and village conditions are emailed to any person making a booking, so they're very aware of the location of the premises. But our position is still clear that should this application be granted, the changes to traffic to and from Exton Park will certainly be modest and would not materially impact the village, especially as the current levels that we've got whilst we're trading under our off licence have not caused any issues or concerns. We have also, just following on from the meeting in January, been working on a traffic management plan, and this was suggested, I think, by the residents at the meeting, and a copy is in the paper of a summary. And as I said in my submission, the methodology is using safety nets. So these are considerations that the applicant Exton Park will put into place for each of the events. And we also received a representation late on Tuesday, which is supplementary papers number 2, and we've got no objection to it being included. We don't want people to feel as though they haven't been heard today. And that relates to alternate access to the vineyard. Just to be clear, the road Mr. Richards in that representation is referring to is a private tarmac road, and it leads from the estate north towards the top of the Whiteways and Beacon Hill. But this isn't a solution or an option. Firstly, it's only open to the estate from February to around June as a result of the game shoot. And secondly, to create any access road is substantial cost to the applicant now. The application should be determined on the evidence and not speculation or future fears. The guidance also states that the licensing authorities should be alive to indirect costs that can arise because of conditions, and they should therefore ensure that any conditions they impose are only those which are appropriate to the promotion of the licensing objectives. That's not to say we haven't considered alternate routes. We have, and we will continue to do so. And there were discussions, Robin went and met with the stud farm nearby, but whilst access was discussed, there's no future plans or agreements to use that in the foreseeable future. But even if permissions were possible, it does not change the position that the current and future levels of traffic are modest, relatively light, and would not materially impact the village, especially if the current position and the current levels do not cause any problems. It's this point that's so important, because any alternate new access route is just simply unnecessary given the actual traffic levels. Further noteworthy that Exton Park has run a number of events, as I said, under TENS, no complaints, no issues with child protection or public nuisance or antisocial behaviour or anything else raised in the representations. There's also no evidence that Exton Park's current operation under the off licence has caused any crime and disorder concerns within the village or the local area. Another important point just to raise is that the visitors do not come uninvited, as they're by invitation or visitors need to make an appointment or have a booking. So we're a private estate. There's access gates. You can't just drive in from the lane on a whim and ask to attend. There are gates and access pads to the vineyard. This is further protection to the nearby residents, because whilst we're seeking 11 p.m, which aren't late hours, and typically I would expect, they're considered pub hours to deal with that, we're not operating as a pub with general access permitted. We know who is attending, we know when they're attending, and we have bookings, and we can control access and egress and manage it accordingly in accordance with the risk assessments we're carrying out and with the traffic management plan. We will continue to put access arrangements and comments on the village and confirmations of attendances as well, so visitors will have information on the locality. As said earlier, the premises already has a licence for sales of wine in a different building. We have people attending the vineyard now, and we do not anticipate there to be further increase in traffic. But considering the fact that we have an off licence, we could technically do what we want to do under that licence through the off sales permission. The off licence is in a separate building, which is, I don't know if you've got a copy of that licence there, but it's off a tarmac courtyard from Exton Hall, and we could do off licences to the hall itself. The benefit to the residents of this application is that the licence and the operation can be controlled by way of condition, and more importantly, it can be enforced by way of condition. It further provides clarity and transparency to everyone for the operation, for the authorities and for the local residents. It also allows the sale of alcohol to be better controlled to promote the licensing objectives further, and we all know that breach of condition also carry criminal sanctions. The off licence only has one condition relating to deliveries, and we are proposing a number of additional conditions dealing with the actual operation. The benefit to the applicant, of course, of the application is the ease where the point of sale can be, and that planning and monitoring of alcohol can be better supervised, which is another benefit for the promotion of the licensing objectives. In terms of noise, no objections been raised by the noise team, and we've described the events above. We've proposed a conditions for risk assessments. That's at A5. The conditions at page 15 to 16 of the report. If the residents, which has been raised in a number of objections, have a problem with the shoe-in, as described in some of the objections, this should be obviously addressed directly with the shoe-in pub. We have parking facilities at the vineyard, so there won't be clogging up of cars on the lanes in terms of parking, so the community won't be affected in that regard either. Comments on lighting, which have been raised in a number of representations, we would say that they're planning objections, and there's conditions on the planning permission dealing with this. We've also proposed a condition on dispersal, that's at A4, and a direct telephone line being given to the residents at A3, although I understand most of the residents will have Kit and Robin's number already, and certainly email correspondence, certainly from the meeting in January if they attended. There's staff training conditions and notices being displayed in respect of dispersal, that's at PN1, and we support any local crime initiatives, although again the police have not objected, and we have challenge 25 importantly. There's never been any issues in terms of underage sales at the venue currently. Concerns has been raised by a number of residents as to what happens if the premises are on-sold. There's no intention to do so. This is a vineyard they've planted in 2004. This is a long-term investment, and a number of the senior members, including Kit and Robin, are shareholders as well. So there is a significant personal investment in terms of operating well. But should members wish, we've got no objection to imposing a further condition that licensable activities will only take place by Exton Park Vineyard LLP. This will provide a condition that if it is on-sold, and again, there is 100% no intention to do that this is a long-term investment, and for that reason, we'd say it's unnecessary, but we'll leave that with members once you hear from the residents. So, just in summary, and I'll try and be quick, this application must be determined on its own merits. No precedents will be set in terms of should this application be granted. The question of need and other amenity issues are in the realm of planning. The licensing regime is generally a permissive one, unless there's good reasons to restrict the licence, having regard to the licensing objectives. And my client's not complacent when it comes to the community and residents, having already held a residents meeting, but the applicant's well aware that other persons or the responsible authorities can review the licence at any time should there be breaches of licence conditions, and call it back before yourselves to look at those concerns. But again, there's no concerns in terms of evidence of the existing operation, which it has been doing for a number of years, and obviously you need to look at the licensing objectives. And the evidence members have before it is that there's no substantive complaints about the operation of Exton Park to date. There have been no breaches of licence conditions, and I'm sure the licensing authority can confirm that. There's been no transport incidents of note, and there's been no threat to the safety of children. It holds a licence, it's been trading, the use of the lanes and roads in terms of walkers and horses, we're well aware of that having been there, but that won't change as a result of this application being granted, and there's no crime or disorder concerns at all. And obviously the off licence, there hasn't been any review or complaints in terms of that premises. It's traded very separately, very successfully. The application, if granted, will allow Exton Park to stand on its own 2 feet and make a sustainable business, as well as terms of the clarity of the licence conditions and enforceability, which will help in local employment as well. Certainly my client is well aware, as I said, they've read all the letters of objection and they don't want to operate in any way that's going to jeopardise the support that they've got in terms of the 29 letters in the committee paper as well. So I have Kit and Robin here, but I won't call them. I think I've said enough, and if you've got any questions, they'd be more than happy to answer them direct.
Thank you. Can I just have a clearance of a clarification. You spoke in the early part about the number per week, between 30 and 40.
Yeah, we're anticipating it. It's not a big rollout in terms of we're going to have large scale events. So it will be a genuine sort of rollout in terms of little events. It's very important when I talk about events that we have regard to the numbers and what the style of those. We'll have wine tasting for 2 people that will come along. So it will come on a needs basis to deal with that. But we're very confident that the proposal that we have will not cause any concern or material impact on the village. Do you have anything you want to add, Robin? No?
Right. Could I also, you say the vineyard is fully planted, and the other parcel of land that's attached to the vineyard? There is another parcel of land that's attached to the vineyard?
There's, if you mean that with reference to the top access question,
Yes.
yeah, that belongs to Malcolm Isaac, who owns the vineyard and that piece of land, but it's not vineyard land and it's not plantable for vineyard use either. So, and apart from that, there's no intention at all now to expand the vineyard further.
Right. Thank you very much. Councillor Ashwell, questions?
Yeah, could you just, so you're saying you want to expand to 30, 40 people possibly per week. So how many people do you have coming there at the moment, approximately?
In 2022, we averaged about 20, 25 a week. So that's a 23 figure, and we'd expect it to expand modestly. We have to grow as a business, but we are a private estate, so there is limits to that in terms of the sort of expansion we're talking about. It's worth just mentioning, if I quickly may, that other vineyards in the South Downs have 1,000 visitors a week. So just put that in proportion.
Thank you very much.
Could I ask how many covers you have within the structure?
Sorry, covers.
Yes.
So if you're dining, the dining room is maximum 22. The boardroom is 12. The tasting room is 10. These are quite modest numbers.
No more than 50.
No more than 50.
Thank you very much. We'll now move on to responsible other authorities. I don't think we have any present, so I then move on to other persons. And I will call upon David Frere-Cook to make your presentation, if you would please. And you're presenting on behalf of 5 other people, according to the list.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will read it if I may. It may sound slightly wordy at the start, but I think it puts question marks on some of the figures being offered to us. 23 objectors, 21 of them live on the proposed traffic access within the village, whereas of 28 supporters, only 2 live on that access road, other than supporters who either work in the vineyard or some come from as far away as London. There was a restrictive caveat on the vineyard on the building of Exton Hall, and I quote, "The building hereby approved shall be used for wine promotional purposes, including office use and for no other purpose. To restrict the use of the premises in the interest of highway safety and local amenity and protect the landscape character of the South Downs National Park." The first planning application had small wine tasting groups of 6 to 8 people. Now the applicant is stating in clause 16 estimates of 30 to 40 people visiting per week. We are now actively promoting Exton Hall as an events venue. I know for a fact there was a private party there recently by a club member celebrating a marriage milestone with approximately 100 guests at it. The CEO advised us in his 3-year plan, when talking to us in January, that the vineyard expected to generate 80% of its income, with the remaining 20% coming from events. It's fully planted. One can conservatively expect 120,000 bottles a year of wine to be produced from 60 acres. The wine retails locally at £39 a bottle. Even at half price, allowing for wholesale, This yield will generate an income of roughly 2.4 million a year. As stated, that's 80% of predicted income. The other 20% generated from events will be £600,000 a year. At say £100 a head, that equates to 120 guests plus attendant service traffic every week. That's a conservative estimate. Exton Hall has enormous capacity for events and is manifestly fitted out for them, albeit covers for 50, as we've just heard. It advertises 5 premium multifunctional indoor spaces where guests can work, relax and celebrate, as well as 2 sun terraces. Apparently their wines will be the finishing touch, not the main focus at events. The issuing of the on-site licence will, as we've heard, permit large-scale entertainment legally, up to 500 people, technically with live music all day, every day, selling all types of alcohol, not just wine. And as we've heard, it could be passed on, but clearly it's not the intention. Prevention of crime and disorder. Doubtless more traffic will put in a potential for more crime and disorderly behaviour of people returning from events. Public nuisance. At the January meeting, it was made very clear to the CEO that many residents and frequent visitors to the village have already noticed an annoying increase in traffic since Exton Park came into being. Further increase would cause more sound pollution. Arrival and dispersal from events in the hours of darkness would cause more light pollution. And the SDMP is one of only 2 designated dark sky reserve areas in England. Exton Hall's prominent location will inevitably compromise the dark sky policy. Travelling through the village with headlights typically on full beam will shine directly into bedrooms and sitting room windows. That will compromise our rightful to peaceful enjoyment of our homes and possessions, Articles 1 and 8 of the Human Rights Act. And the Meehan Valley is an echo chamber, so the impact will also be felt on the other side of the valley in Meanstoke. Public safety is a key policy as far as we're concerned. The proposed access through Exton are completely unsuitable for any significant increase in traffic. Exton lanes, we've heard, are hazardous at the best of times, mostly single tracked with high hedges and flint walls, only occasional and awkward passing places, often residents' driveways. Both approaches to the vineyard through the village of Exton involve 5 right-angled bends. We've had coaches stuck on them with migrant workers going to the vineyard. My own flint wall was damaged. The CEO very kindly claimed culpability for the damage to our flint wall and paid for its repair. The verges in Exton are doubtless being eroded more rapidly, especially on the tight bends, since the opening of the Exton Park. And as we've heard, it is a very busy area on the South Downs Way through the village, with more hazardous for residents and their visitors, young and old. Large groups of walkers, cyclists and riders come through, and the village has no pavements, no street lighting, and the verges are mostly too narrow to stand on. The unsuitability of these lanes has been officially established when back in 1998, the Stud had a restricted permission to install a 2.1 metre high barrier in order to restrict all lorries and horse boxes entering the site from Allen's Farm Lane. This was in the interest of highway safety again. Traffic has obviously increased in the last 25 years. Most concerns for the protection of children from harm have been discussed already. The increase in traffic brings greater risk and harm to those living in the village. Conclusion. How the current licence works controls the use of Exton Hall and thus the volumes of traffic and other pollution it generates in the area. It also ensures clarity and transparency with TENS notices. An economic benefit to the SDMP or a financial gain of the owners of Exton Park would be hugely outweighed by the detrimental impact to the local community. And we have discussed the top gate access to Exton Park, which has already been said is there for the use, and I quote again, of large vehicles entering to the vineyard deliveries and collections. But we now hear that would only be available certain months of the year. What happens to these large vehicles for the other 6 months of the year? As it is, it will interfere with the private landowners and could adversely hit pheasant shoot. Which is more important, the safety and amenity of the people or the pheasants that are being bred to be shot? It would be, excuse me, my last sentence, if despite all these considerations, you are minded to grant the current licence application, possibly in some amended form with shorter hours of opening, we respectfully request that very specifically worded and forward-thinking caveats be applied in order to protect the nearby community and the SDMP. Thank you for listening me out.
Sorry, thank you. Are there any questions? No? Can I call on the applicants? Have you any questions you would like to?
Any questions, Chair? Obviously I have a few comments to make, but will I save those for my summing up?
Any questions at this point? Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Faircook. If you could retire to the public gallery, it'd be great. And I call upon Mr. Roy Middleton.
Chair, before you do, just take a moment. Could I just take a moment, take a comfort break? We just take a comfort break. Do we take a comfort break? Yes.
It looks like comfort break has been called. So we'll resume in 5 to 2, 5 to 1 by that clock. So you're not getting an hour and 10 minutes. Right, I hope you're all relieved, and we'll now, Mr. Roy Middleton, would you please present your paper, please?
Hello, good afternoon. I'm here representing myself and my wife Claire. I'm expanding on my original representation regarding how I know about the vineyard and having worked there and how it's important to support local and rural business. As I say, my wife and I have worked on casual occasions there over the last few years. We used to live very local in Meonstoke, the village opposite. We now do not. We live about 4 miles away now. And I'm there really supporting the importance of rural and local business. And as a retired local businessman, I understand the importance of authority support as well as residents and local initiatives. Where the job opportunities that the vineyard offers are very important in an area which is primarily supported by businesses such as farming, which I'm sure if everyone's watching Clarkson's Farm, everyone understands the difficulties they have, and therefore the importance of new business opportunities to help, particularly with young and old, are very important. The vineyard offers that opportunity to people. There are old people working there like me in the past. There are young people who have opportunities there. And the vineyard is very flexible in offering part-time, full-time and flexible working hours to the local people. I would also mention that I believe there was a white paper published in April 2000 relating to the Licensing Act, which did, I think that the paper was related to modernising and integrating the alcohol, public entertainment and night refreshment licensing schemes. And in that, one of its key aims was also to encourage self-sufficient rural communities. I would just put that in people's minds. I understand that all of that is important on the fundamental 4 objectives that have been mentioned many, many times. And I would just like to give an example that I recently attended one of the typical events. In fact, last Friday, I don't know whether any complaints have been received since last Friday. I did creep home quietly. And I don't quite see where any of those fundamental objectives would be a problem. The area we live in has low crime rate. I don't see that having this license would encourage any significant, if any, increase in crime and disorder. Public safety, while I was at the vineyard, this is what we're talking about, I saw no reasons to question my public safety or that of others on both my way there or during my visit or stay during that evening on Friday. And I hasten to mention on other visits I've made to other events. As far as public nuisance is concerned, the number of cars, I think, for the event on Friday, which I believe was around about 20 people, was 7 cars. Obviously, people tend to car share because there is alcohol. People don't drink and drive these days. And I think that something else that I was impressed with was the as the sun went down and the lights in the building became or could become an issue, a button was pressed by Robin and all of the blinds, blackout blinds, came down electronically in the building to ensure that there was minimal light pollution. So these people are taking it very seriously in what they're trying to achieve. So I think that's important. Equally, as far as harm to children, let's be clear, these people are going to enforce a Challenge 25 policy, I'm sure. I would also add that I don't quite see that young people are going to be overly enthusiastic to go drinking pints of rosé sparkling wine. And those are not the sort of events that these people are going to have. These are professional people running a professional operation. And I just don't perceive that there will be any considered harm for children being able to get hold of alcohol. And I don't believe these people would serve minors anyway. I hope that the licensing subcommittee can support this application and encourage rural local businesses that I think are very important in our beloved Meon Valley. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Middleton. Any questions, Councillor Ashton?
No.
Councillor Labour?
No.
Thank you very much. If you kindly take a seat in the public gallery, be grateful. I now call upon Mr. Kevin Robertson.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm speaking on behalf of myself, my wife who's present, our children, and a number of other villages also. I've got 4 points to address. The first,
seems to be most relevant to all of the objections and what we've heard today is traffic. I was also at the event on Friday evening. I'm not sure how many villagers who would have been affected by traffic noticed the event happened, but the number of cars, Roy was correct, there were 7 vehicles for additional to the normal vineyard personnel for the event, which reflects our applicants, solicitors' numbers of what they'd expect. On the same day, my office at home, I'm working at home currently, looked over the main road. I saw 6 grocery vehicles doing deliveries in Exton and 15 Amazon type vehicles enter the village during daylight. If you equate that, 21 vehicles entered, 3 times more than the event at the Exton Hall. That wasn't an average day. I'd say an average is probably about 10 a day I see go into the village, which equates to more than 3,000 additional deliveries in Exton as a village every year, as opposed to 7 extra vehicles per event. I think that's a significant item to be raised, and that is where most of the damage is caused to the verges and would pose threats to children riding their bikes, pedestrians walking their dogs, or even the horse traffic through the village. I think that should be considered. Furthermore, employment for local people is very important. Yes, we do see Romanians coming for wine picking, the harvest, which is how I got involved in the first place in 2018. It was on my bucket list to do. I coerced other people to come along. But a number of children in the village have actually worked in the vineyard and continue to do so. If we had the will in the UK to work under such conditions, we wouldn't need to employ foreign labour to do that work. So I think encouraging local people to work in the vineyard is very, very important. And the success of the vineyard itself is critical to get that employment in the village. Temporary licenses are already in place. They can apply and they have applied, and I'm not sure how many we've had over the period that I've been involved, but quite a few have been granted. So why can't this be made a permanent? Because currently they have to apply for a license, which takes manpower and cost on the vineyard, and those costs are unnecessary for a business to succeed. So I think they're very, very important factors that need to be considered. And finally, local enterprise, as Roy mentioned, is a very important part for us in the area. We don't have any industry. We don't have anything apart from agriculture in the area, and we need to continue that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robinson. Any questions? Thank you very much. If you'd like to retire to the public gallery, be grateful. And finally, but not least, welcome.
Hello, hi. I'm Amanda Berwick. I live in the village. I'm mum of 4, owner of 2 dogs. I represent my husband, but I probably am representative of a good number of people in the village who have children and dogs. I think I just want to start by saying, actually, I'm a supporter of the vineyard in that I've enjoyed their produce at both the pub and you can buy it at the local shop. I've been to an event there, and I enjoy the vineyard and what they've done to the land around us. However, what I've heard from the representation is a lot of anticipated and intended that what they think to do in the future with the vineyard. So things change. It's a commercial enterprise, so I don't hold a lot of store with what's anticipated and what's intended, based on the fact that I think, as the CEO said himself, that other vineyards have thousands of people visiting a week. So why wouldn't Exton Park follow the same route as a starting point, really? So my concern really is that that is the future plan. And once the licence, if granted, is given to the vineyard, it goes to the vineyard and not the CEO and the current intentions that they may have. I've heard a lot of talk about the community. Well, as a villager, I am the community, and I've seen lots of people supporting it who refer to the benefit to the community. I see no benefit to me of increasing the usage of the vineyard in its current form. The public safety to me is not Challenge 25, it's to the roads, and it's to my children walking our dogs, it's to me walking our dogs, it's to other people walking around the village. And as you've heard, there's no pavement, there's no verges, there's no street lighting, it's very narrow lanes, and with the increase in usage predominantly post-pandemic, where people are advised to come out and walk in the country, we have a lot of cars now parked in our village, and there is no central parking space. So any traffic going through our village is really quite dangerous for anybody trying to walk. And whilst Exton Park have said that, and I've been to an event, and they encourage people to come using the White Way, which is the road down from the top of our village, there is only 4 passing points down that road, and it's over a mile long. When you get to the bottom of that road, the final part in towards Exton Park, there are no passing points. So if you meet a car coming down that way, or one car meets another, the only option is to reverse. That in itself is pretty dangerous. It's pretty dangerous if you're on the road. It's pretty dangerous if you're in your car. They've also talked about the top road. There is the access road, and Malcolm Isaac has decided, for whatever reasons, not to make that available to the vineyard. It would solve an awful lot of problems, and the decision he's made is based entirely on cost to him. However, the cost to the village of continuing to have traffic coming all the way down the White Way is not great at all. As a local person, having been invited to an event, if you put into your sat nav how to get to Exton Park anywhere off the A32, it will take you straight through the village. And as humans, we look for the quickest route. That's just what we do. You look at the sat nav, you don't actually look at where it's taking you, you just follow, turn left, turn right. It will take you through the village. And that's across, I think there's about 6 90-degree bends, which you can't see round. And, you know, if your car swerves around a corner, you're likely to come across someone. It's quite dangerous. The other point about the lorries coming into the village, I know that they've said that there haven't been any complaints. Probably not formally. So if we'd known that we needed to make formal complaints, maybe we'd have done so. But I have, in passing, spoken to staff at the vineyard to say that, you know, my kids met someone driving a car very fast, going up to the vineyard to work. And it has been mentioned, and apparently someone's been spoken to. But if at any point we've been asked to make official complaints, we probably could have done, because our front garden has been backed into numerous times by lorries taking the corner on a blind corner going the wrong way. So I think, in fairness, to say that there have been no complaints, I think that's pretty unfair. Finally, they talk about the events page that means they can have up to 500 without having any additional license. And again, the intention and anticipation is they'll only have a few. That doesn't make any commercial sense. And I know that when we've had an event in the past, the Fizz Fest, which is a collection of all the vineyards, which in the past has been held in the middle of our village, why wouldn't that be held up at the vineyard? In which case, you've once again got a lot of people coming into the village, down either the White Way or through the village. I'd also say that a lot of the point has been made about jobs in our community. Well, if the increase in traffic is minimal and the vineyard is at its maximum, there are no extra jobs to be had, surely. In which case, increasing the number of people coming through and using it means you're increasing people preparing the food, delivering the wine, serving the people there. So that to me is the only increase in jobs, which as a community doesn't benefit me at all. I'm still in support of local business, I am, and I think what they've done there is great. But I think the plans to extend it to this, I mean, reading it means they can have live music events, they could have a boxing match, you know, it's a huge list here that once granted, they could do really any of all of those on a weekly basis, should they so desire. I think really in summary, it's to say that as someone who lives in this village, which is the beautiful part of the South Downs National Park and an area of outstanding natural beauty, we bought a house in that village because it's quiet, because it's dark, because it's a gentle place to live. And there will be an increase in traffic coming through, regardless of what instructions I believe they put on their website about where cars should be directed. So that's my commentary.
Thank you, Mrs. Barry. Any questions? Thank you very much. If you'd like to, oh, my apologies. Are there any questions you want to bring? I now call upon the applicants of the premises in order to clarify any points raised by the representations that you may have thought of after they've retired.
Thank you, sir. Just to address a couple of comments made by Mr. Freer Cook. He talked of events, a wedding event for 100 people. We've checked and we've never had 100 guests for an event, or certainly for a wedding. There was a strange inquiry about a month ago in relation to an event, but nothing happened when we sought to get email confirmation of what it was. But certainly we don't know about any event that is being claimed there. And we do not agree and do not accept in any way the figures that Mr. Freer Cook made in his submission. Certainly even the quantity of wines of bottles of wine being sold were not even what was communicated to the community at the residents' meeting in January. They're grossly excessive. We would love that to be the case, but grossly excessive. So the figures and information that's been provided is certainly not agreed. In terms of noise comment by Mr. Freer Cook, we have not had any issues in terms of noise currently under the temporary event notices that we've held, and again, no objection from environmental health in terms of that. And as people may be aware, and potentially for the residents' benefits, there's various mechanisms that can control sound escape from the premises, and certainly in terms of enforcement as well under the Environmental Protection Act, noise abatement notices, and the review of the premises licence. We do not foresee in any way that any mechanism will be required or necessary in terms of the proposals for the vineyard. A comment was also made about the larger vehicles using the north during various months of the year outside of the shoot. And I am told that larger vehicles, there are ways, times, very specific times around the shoot that they can still get access to the vineyard. In terms of alternate access gates, a lot was said as well in terms of using the north access. I am being told during the comfort break that the gates were originally, this was pre-Kit's employment at the premises, at the north entrance to the vineyard, and it was Mr. Freer Smith and his wife that objected to that in terms of a planning, and they were moved to where they were. So that's not an option in terms of access to the premises. Further comments was in relation to promoting and selling various forms of alcohol to deal with that. In accordance with the planning permission, we are for the promotion. We're a vineyard, so we are promoting the wine, and we do not sell or stock beer or spirits in terms of that. In terms of complaints and comments made, which we're grateful for from Amanda, obviously, the application needs to be determined on the evidence today. We're very aware of the locality where we live in terms of walking along the lanes, etc., but we're not aware of any issues in terms of children being at risk in terms of the vineyard operation. And the representation seemed to me to be sort of based on the location of where the vineyard was, which is clearly we have planning permission, we have permission to operate the vineyard where we are. Otherwise, I think I've sort of dealt with everything, and I would rely on my written and oral submissions in terms of the application made.
Thank you very much. Councillor Laming, any further questions for clarify any points that have been given?
We hear various figures being given for the maximum number of people attending the events. Can we have any assurance on what your plans are on that? Because obviously there's a difference between 40 or 50 people compared to 100 to 500.
Certainly. The point I was making about other vineyards earlier on and the tens of thousands that they attend is that we are not doing that. So we are unlike most of our competitors. We don't do cellar door where you can just ramp up and purchase. So to answer your question, I consider as chief executive and Malcolm Isaac as the owner, the private estate status of this to be very important. And Malcolm, bless him, is 95, and he is looking to the future after him and ensuring that that private estate status stays in place for many years to come. And so that is the limiting factor in the number of events. That's why we won't do weddings and have big 500 people type events, because our owner and it's not part of our business plan, it's not part of our model.
And just if I could further comment, I think the figure of the 500 has come from the Live Music Act, which was mentioned at the original opening statement from the licensing team, we have never mentioned having an event of 500 people. And as we've heard, it's not the intention. And I think that was just the legal position, and people have picked up on that perhaps incorrectly.
Yes, I mean, I only raise that because we've heard from other people on the floor on their fears, and I think we need to take that into consideration. Thank you.
That's right.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned about the shoot that you have is, so I'm not really aware of what happens in the country much. So how often does a shoot happen and how many people attend that?
Yeah, sure. So the shoot is, just to clarify, so the may have seen from the maps earlier, we have a specific legal delineation of the Exton Park Vineyard LLP land. Attaching to that to the north is MJI Farming Limited land, which is owned by Malcolm Isaac, who is our owner, but legally separate. And on that land is a game shoot, which he's run for many years. And the game shooting season runs from September through to January, inclusive. So it starts with, I'm also not from this world, but it starts with partridge shooting through to pheasant shooting and ends at the end of January. So this is what the birds are also then laid down to develop in time for September in June, July. And this is a restriction in terms of all of the feeding pens for that shoot are on the ridge, which is where that tarmac road travels north, so that they can be in the right position for when the shooting comes. So by taking a lot of traffic through that road, or indeed much traffic at all, it scares birds away, which itself is a commercial investment to run this commercial shoot. So this is the challenge we have there, but it does mean we don't have that access through there. We only have access from February through to June.
So the shoot has nothing to do with the vineyard per se.
Thank you very much.
Just one from me. It has been mentioned the hours of opening, or shall we say the hours of closing, I think is the more concerning matter. Would you consider rearranging those hours, or would you prefer to stick with what you've 2,300 hours?
Excuse me, sorry, could you just put your
Sorry.
microphone?
Sorry, and that's for all the reasons and submissions that I've made in terms of the style of event that we will have, which is only small. And we are firmly of the belief that what's proposed at the vineyard will not cause any public nuisance. They're the same modest hours that a pub has, although we have the added benefit, remember, that we are not open to the public where everyone can just come. And because it's by invitation in terms of access to the vineyard, whatever the event, we are in the privileged position where we are able to deal with access, deal with egress. We've got a dispersal policy and we've offered the risk assessment, so everything will be timed. There's sufficient staffing, there's sufficient parking at the premises for that. So we would seek for the hours that we've applied for, sir.
Thank you very much. The committee are now going to a private session, and different to what it says on my crib sheet, it's not the subcommittee with the retire, but alas, it's everybody else. We will reconvene a little bit later. I need to talk to the head of legal because this is a little complicated, because we're crossing the path of planning as well as licensing, and it's making that clear exactly where we stand. So, Nathan.
Chair, if I can just ask Lana, in the break we were passed documentation from Mr. Faircook, some of the information he didn't add to his representation. I just wanted to check if you had the chance to read it and if there was, whether that's something the committee, excuse me.
I have, and I do believe it's exactly what he has said during the presentation. So I have no objection, but on the strict proviso, as I said during the submissions, that the numbers and in terms of the financial information is not accepted. It's not what's been communicated to the community. So it's not the position of the applicant, and we don't know really where that information has come from.
Okay. I think it's worth mentioning also, sorry, don't know what's going on with these. Sometimes when people prepare their representations for the committee today, sometimes they do stray off what would have been in their representation initially. And I think it's important to mention today that the members can only consider what was in the representations unless there was anything that's come to light that wouldn't have been available at the time they submitted their representations. And also if there's any consideration of conditions, that obviously they need to be proportionate. And if there's any questions that members might have of the applicants whilst they're here in front of you, of any consideration of possible conditions, that's worthwhile asking any questions of the applicant while you're here, such as if you were considering number of events, number of people as a maximum. That's something maybe that you may wish to question the applicant on now whilst they're here.
I also have in written format the proposed condition I mentioned in my submission about the licensable activities, so I can pass that to you before I leave the room.
It would appear that my colleagues and I feel there may be some reasoning for conditioning. I look to Nathan, please, for some sort of guidance on the legal side of that.
Well, just as you've been guided there, Chair, the applicant's here, and you can make questions and ask questions in relation to, the number of individuals, what would be, reasonable in terms of a cap. Obviously, the application says up to 499, which is the numbers mentioned earlier on. But is there a number of individuals that, for example, the applicant knows full well that they won't exceed? They're talking in the region of, was it 20 to 40 individuals, but that they may wish now to just maybe commit to a maximum number and timings of events and things like that. So just have a conversation and explore what they're willing to do there.
Councillor Lehman.
What would be the net maximum number of people that you would expect?
Are we talking on an annual basis or weekly? What
Per event?
Sorry?
Per event.
The problem that the nature of events is such that they could vary between from anything from 2 through to 40 or 60.
So if we said 70, that'd be quite sufficient for you.
Yeah. 70 is a restriction on events.
I think as
Okay,
an
that's
upper
fine.
number to deal with that would be fair. I mean, this application, as we've said, is for us. We have an off license, which is unrestricted in terms of numbers. We're looking to come here for the ease of what the application is, and we do need some flexibility. There might be one event 1 week, there might be no events for 3 weeks, and then 2 events the week after. We need the flexibility for that, but I think that number would be fair.
Okay, well, perhaps we'll consider that.
Just regards the timing of the events, would you consider maybe changing the time to finish at 10:30 rather than 11?
That would be no problem, probably against my advice, but that could, you've heard from the clients for direct.
Thank you, Chair.
The final one is the access point. We've heard a lot today about access and the concerns that local residents have. Would you have any objection to the alternative access being a condition?
For all the reasons, and I think you'll take advice from legal in terms of that. We've heard that it's just not a viable ability for the vineyard to deal with that, in terms of the shoot, in terms of cost to deal with that, and also in terms of access. You need to look at it in terms of the events and what's actually being proposed at the vineyard, that the impact on the village in terms of access, we do not think that they will be materially affected in any way, shape or form for this. So we would have a problem, and conditions must be appropriate and proportionate, having regard to the financial viability of the business as well.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
For the members of the, we have one of the members of the panel has actually had another appointment at 5 o'clock, so latest we can stay until 4. So we're now at 2:30.
I'm minded, I would like to take time over your discussion, make sure I've heard, you've had your discussion in full, and we appropriately record your reasons. So I wouldn't want to keep anybody behind unnecessarily. And share the decision with, I think the regulations state within 5 working days, the decision needs to be communicated with reasons within 5 working days. So that's as much as I'm going to commit to right now. Absolutely.
Yes, all that detail would be, you may well have heard. We would like to reconvene the meeting, looking at availability. Nancy, is that?
Sorry, Chair, there's no need to necessarily reconvene the meeting to make the decision and reasons known. So essentially what can happen is you can retire now, make your decision, provide your reasons, and then those reasons and decisions just be communicated to the applicant and other parties in due course. So there will be no need to further have an adjourned meeting in this capacity. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Correction. We'll go into a private session. The decision will be communicated to all parties present that have been speakers, and obviously the applicants, within 7 days, 5 working days. I was trying to give you the benefit of the doubt, an extra couple of days. So could I thank you for your attendance today and have a safe journey home. Thank you. This part of the meeting is closed at 2:25.